So point A, and remember, every module has an A, B, and a C. By the way, this is going to be the longest module because we're going to get into some of the tech of your web and social media and all of that as you articulate this path. First thing you got to do is this. You need to determine what a fully developed disciple looks like in your organization. Now that might be different and is unique in different churches, even churches of the same denomination, even churches that are down the street from one another in the same context. You want to determine what is the way that you do it. It might be the same as some other places. So it doesn't mean nobody's ever done it ever that way before. It just means, hey, what does this look like in our context? Now, one of my friends, Kent Maddox, said this. He goes, I think this is important, this point right here. He said, one element it needs to include is that they don't need you when they are a fully developed disciple. Doesn't mean that they're not still growing, doesn't mean they're not still learning, doesn't mean they might not come back to you for advice, but they don't need you any more than your adult kids need you. So maturity and self-determination, self-support is the goal, meaning they don't need you in order to hear the voice of God. Again, this doesn't mean that they don't come back to you ever. Doesn't mean they don't stay in relationship with you. When I was going through one of the most difficult seasons of my life, probably became closer to my father during that time than I had ever been. You know, like the relationship in a unique way leveled up. So got advice from him, got wisdom from him. This happened when I was in my mid to late 40s. But yet I'm still supporting myself and I'm on my own. So it doesn't mean that they don't come back. It doesn't mean that they don't need your wisdom, your input, your advice. Doesn't mean they don't cherish the relationship. It doesn't mean the relationship ends. It means that they are mature, they can self-determine, they can self-support. Paul says this. Let me put a couple verses together. In Colossians chapter 1, verse 27, he says, Christ in you is your hope of glory. Every person walking around in your church has the presence and power of Christ inside them. And what we want to do is to awaken them to that reality and then empower them to live out of that truth. In Galatians 4:19, he said to his church, I long for Christ to be formed in you. So put them together. What's he saying? Hey, Christ is inside of you. What I want is for the full expression of that to manifest, for him to be formed in you. That's the goal. He wanted people to awaken to the first reality that Christ is in them and then move towards expressing and living out that truth. That is our metric. More than merely counting nickels and noses, or to say it another way, butts and bucks, we want to articulate a path that doesn't just pack a place full of people. Okay, no points for filling up the building. Rather, we want to lead people towards such a high degree of life transformation that they no longer need us to guide them. They can turn around and guide others. That's what Hebrews 5:12 says. Again, we want to lead people towards such a high degree of life transformation, they no longer need us to guide them. Here's another thing that means is maybe you need to get behind their mission when they come to your church and not just assume that they are there to serve your mission. Now, there's this great verse. I'm going to put it in here right now as you and I are talking. It's in 1 Corinthians. You probably know this one. 1 Corinthians 12:18. Paul tells the church at Corinth that God arranged the parts of the body just as he wanted them. Now, if you think about that and what that really means, so often church leaders look at this from the perspective of oh, hey, we need let's just make up a term. We need a bugler. Now, I don't know why any church would need a bugler, particularly. They might. We need a bugler, and we prayed, and God sent us a bugler. I mean, how many times have you heard church leaders say, we're just praying for a drummer? We bought a set of drums, put them on the stage, just praying for the day a drummer walks in the door, and then they do. Oh, and thankfully, God sends us what we need. At the same time, what I'm saying is sometimes he might send them to us because we're what they need. Not so that they could serve our agenda and fill in a gap that we've got, but so that we could serve their agenda and fill in a gap that they have. Supply, in some sense, what's lacking there. Assuming that if God is for them and if God is for us at the same time, that it's going to be a reciprocal relationship. Especially if they're destined to be a fully developed disciple that no longer necessarily, quote, needs us, but we choose to walk in relationship together. Here's what I'm getting at. I just dropped this slide in because I thought it was such a powerful idea for this point. Too often, church leaders presume this means God sent the people to us to serve our agenda, to become ushers and greeters, to work the parking lots, or serve in the kids' ministry. Now, thankfully, he does that, but it may be and likely is that he sends them to us to resource them, meaning he's going to use us to resource them and then send them back out. So he might send us to get behind their ministry rather than getting behind our ministry. That's all part of determining what a fully developed disciple looks like in our organization. It may be that we launch them, that at some point they leave, not that they just linger. And maybe they linger, but there's got to be freedom for all of it. So what you and I needed to do is to define that and then develop a clear path that begins before this person ever reaches our building, our meeting space, and that path, it has objective metrics at each point along the path so that they know where they are, we know where they are, and everyone can celebrate their progress as they step forward from where they are to where they're designed to be. Now, I want you to notice this. It begins before they ever reach your building, because once they reach the building and get in, we're going to send them back out to reach other people before they ever reach our building, or they might even go to somebody else's building somewhere. And that would need to be okay too. But let me give you a couple points about B. Number one, the path should take them through the following steps. 5 steps. Take them through the following 5 steps. Now, I didn't make these concepts up. This is something that, oh goodness, I remember reading something related to this in a book titled The Purpose-Driven Church back in, I probably tackled that in 1998, maybe. I think it came out in 96. So not a new idea to me, but I think it's valuable that we begin looking at our discipleship framework in this way. It takes people through the following 5. Okay, they begin in the community. That's the community in which we live. And at some point, we've got to make physical contact with that person. At some point, we hope they become connected to our church. And if they're not, we hope they become connected to another church, someone else that can lead them through the rest of this process. And by connected, I mean they're in relationship with you. That's part of the discipleship framework. You can't lead someone and help launch them on a path of life transformation if you're not in relationship. More so than just being connected, they actually become part of the congregation and they see you as their church home, more so than just being in that congregation. They commit, they actively serve, and they give in tangible ways that are measurable. At some point, they become the core of that congregation, meaning they're using their gifts. Here's an overview of the five that I just walked through: community connected, congregation committed, and core. I think when I read it in the Purpose Driven Life years ago, or the Purpose Driven Church, it looked more like concentric circles. And that's really a great way to view it as you see it on the screen there. The community is a wider range of people. There's less people that are connected and in a relationship with you. Even less than that are part of the congregation. Not everyone in the congregation is committed. And that's okay, because that means they're being discipled towards that commitment. And then you have more people that are committed than you have in the core. That you could even think about it like this. So at some point in the Life Lift framework, we talk about, you might have new Christians that are either connected or in the congregation, and that at some point you have growing Christians that are kind of in that congregation and committed phase. And then you have fully devoted disciples that are in that committed and core phase. If you don't have people that are in the congregation, a lot of times we want to look at people that aren't, quote, yet committed, and you kind of want to poo and give them a thumbs down mentally, emotionally. But you think about that, if you don't have people in relationship with you that aren't in that connected congregation type phase right there, that means you're really not doing discipleship. You're not reaching new people. If you don't have people that are committed, that means you don't have people that are growing. If you have core, you're not developing fully devoted disciples. So each one of these are part of the process. And it just kind of highlights, hey, if we're lacking in any of these areas, it's just, hey, if we have less people that are connected and should be, or less in the congregation, it means, hey, maybe we're not doing enough outreach. Because if we do outreach, there should be some people moving in that are new, that are just kind of kicking the tires, just getting familiar with the message of Christ and with the church and what we do, who we are. So what we want to do is we want to create a path that goes straight through this line, and it will lead people from absolutely no relationship with the church or with Jesus, all the way into totally developed, fully mature disciples. We need to, on that path, create objective milestones that highlight progress from one space to another on the path, which again can be unique to your church. Now, I'm going to come back to this graphic in a moment. Now, notice we have a man here. We have a goal that he's going to move from where he is to where he's designed to be, where he wants to be. There is a path. There's a bridge to get there with objective milestones, little checkpoints. We'll come back to that. Part of 2, again, is create objective milestones that highlight progress from one space to another on this path, which can be unique to your church, yet it needs to be consistent so that you and other people know where they are along that pathway. Let me give you some hypothetical examples to show you what I'm talking about. These can all be unique to you. You might say, hey, people are connected to our church once we have their contact information and we've corresponded with them back and forth multiple times. And there's email software and phone database and all that kind of stuff that can keep up with that and track that. So it's really easy to do. You don't have to have piles and piles of paper and folders to make sure that you're doing that with pen and pencil. You might say they're part of the congregation once they've attended 2 times a month, or once they've registered, not necessarily committed, but registered for Sunday school, registered for a small group, something of that nature. I remember growing up in a church, fabulous church, when I was, oh goodness, from a kid through high school, uh, right into college. The name of it was Hilldale Baptist Church in the Center Point area, just northeast of Birmingham. And one of the big drives was to grow the Sunday school. And that's really how they measured who was part of the congregation. Now, they didn't say, hey, these people are committed. They didn't say, hey, these are part of the leadership core. But they knew at some point, if we get these people in some sort of relate, that was the measure. Now, you create your own measure of what is it when they're part of the congregation. And one of the reasons you need to have these objective metrics in place is so you don't think that they're more committed than they are. We didn't think that everybody that was in the Sunday school role was core of the church, but these were people that we were in relationship with at some level. You might say they're committed when they actively serve, and some combination, or either when they serve using their gifts or when they give financially, or you might say they're part of the core when they begin using their gifts or when they step into a specific leadership role or some other metric that you decide that you evaluated. Here's a pro tip for you. I have several pro tips throughout this training. You can decide each of the above, but the measures need to be consistent, not legalistic, just constant. Now, the difference here is legalism is saying the person's more valuable to us and to God based on what they do. In some measures, show people are worth more, and some are, and that's not true. That's just there. People aren't more acceptable or more lovable based on what they do or don't do. This really is information for us and for them to show where they are on that discipleship path. So it all needs to be consistent and objective. So it's not based on how we feel or if they're close to us, relationally, they're kind of in our circle, or if we had a good day or if we like them, or, it needs to be so that everybody knows where they are in the process. And it needs to have clear next steps that make sense in the life of your unique church context. So you just continue ushering people objectively along that path. Now, let me just kind of say something. At each one of these, especially when they get to congregation, committed, and core, you might have different classes based on that. So there could be like objective subsets inside of here based on different courses. I was doing a kind of say that because I was doing some consulting for a church several years ago. They had 4 different classes. They were 4 weeks long. One of them was a membership class. One of them was kind of a next level to find your gifts and your calling and your skill set class. It was a clear next step. So you took the membership class first, and then it was a kind of a 101 4-week class, not just a 101 is week 1, 201 is week 2. I mean, it was 4, and you could take these really months apart if you needed to. And then as they got to 301 and 401, those were really leadership classes that were going to talk to people at a much higher level. Point 3 is, once you define all of this, you want to make sure that this path infuses all of the processes throughout your church, all of them. Now, that means you want it to be featured on your website. You want to display it throughout your social media. You want to highlight it through the other processes that are in your church. I'll mention some of those in a moment. You want to create intentional touch points in your community based on that discipleship framework, based on that path. Now, since this training is based predominantly on technology and communicating in the online space, I'm going to spend way more time on websites and social media. But I do want to highlight that you want to communicate this across everywhere, everything.